The room where Mr. Bradley was has a live camera feed, so people can monitor what's going on. We're watching a TV screen outside of the interview.
Yes.
And what did you off and on while Mr. Bradley was in that room? Were you monitoring, at least not maybe continuously, but from time to time, watching the monitor of Mr. Bradley in the interview?
I did not.
Were you present when Agent Bugs went into the room where Mr. Bradley was to attempt to wake him up?
Agent Bugs? No, I was not present.
Agent Bugs was at this was on Gus Hip, the CID facility where this interview room was.
Yes.
On the day when you were there.
Yes.
Right, and you saw him there, right?
I saw Agent Bugs at the CID building, yes.
You saw several agents there, quite a few, actually.
There were a lot of people there that day.
And who were homicide agents?
All the homicide agents were there that day.
How many would you say? Just an estimate, best guess.
Our unit consists of 5 agents and 1 supervisor, so all 6 of us were there that day.
And they, at least some, if not all of those, were there when you got back to the hospital. Correct.
Most of them were there. The only one I don't recall was Agent Martin. I'm not sure if he was there at the time.
Now, as far as Mr. Bradley being under the influence at that time, you would agree that he appeared, you couldn't really tell one way or the other, but it appeared it could have been a combination of him just being groggy and under the influence. Wouldn't that be an accurate assessment of what your observations were?
I would say he was tired when I first went into the room.
Would you say that it could have been a combination of being under the influence as well, and being a combination of being under the influence and tired?
Almost 10 hours later, I would assume he was probably not under the influence of drugs or alcohol at that point.
And this was, as you pointed, about 10 hours after shooting, the point in time when you began to question.
Correct.
Deputy, your name?
That's fine. Deputy is fine.
Oh, we'll go with Agent, because that's what you want. Agent Simic, on February the 19th last year, gave a deposition. Remember that?
Yes.
And Mr. McMaster was there, and I was there, and Paul Porter, and you were asked a series of questions and gave a series of answers. And I'd like to start on page 13 of that transcript. I'll be glad to show it to you.
I'd like to see it.
Okay, so let me tell you what I'm doing, and then let you look at it. Isn't it true at page 13 you were asked this question and gave this answer? Let me approach the witness and show it.
Yes, you may.
And that would be page 13, line 18.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, you were asked this question and gave this answer. Did you see indication in Mr. Bradley that he may have been under the influence of something alcoholic or drugs? Answer, I'm not an expert in this. Okay, however, could he have been under the influence, or was he tired? It could have been a combination of both. That's what you said, right?
Could have.
Could have, right. That was your testimony a little over a year ago.
Yes.
In your deposition. Sworn testimony under oath like today.
Yes.
Now, it's a little hard to understand, but you listened, as did the jury and the rest of us, to the DVD that was just played. But recall that at the very beginning, when you were talking about Miranda with Mr. Bradley, you looked at him and you started to read Miranda to him, and then you paused and you asked him if he was all right. You asked him if he was all right. Remember doing that?
Yes.
Okay, and he was trembling at that point, was he not?
He was cold, yes.
Okay, but he was trembling for whatever reason at that point in time. He was trembling, right?
I believe he said he was cold.
Right. Did get him a blanket. Right. You got him a blanket?
Agent Spatafora got him a blanket.
There you go. And some of the things that he said, let's just see if you heard these. Mr. Bradley said when you asked him to relate to you what had happened, that he said she reached for a gun like she was going to shoot me. He said several times during the course of that interview. Correct?
Yes.
You heard that?
Yes.
Okay, you did hear that. And he thought she was going to, said, I thought she was going to shoot me several times. Yes?
Yeah, you're telling me if it's a question, then yes. Okay.
Okay, I need an answer.
Well, you're not asking a question. You're just testifying. You're telling me what's written there, and
thank you. Mr. Bradley said, and this is a question, which requires an answer. She's trying to pull her gun out. That's what it looks like to Mr. Bradley. That's what he said.
If you're asking me that's what he said, yes.
He had guns pulled on him many times. Yes?
Yes.
Now, these are all questions. Did he say these things? Did you hear him say these things? That he had a number of friends who had been killed, shot and killed.
Yes, he said that.
And some by police officers.
Yes, he said that.
And he had tattoos on his body, a number of tattoos of people who he knew had been shot and killed.
Yes.
And carried a gun like, and we're talking about him, this is another statement that he made. He carried a gun because everybody where he lived carried a gun for protection.
Yes.
He said he had 3 cousins who had been killed by the police.
Yes.
And in particular, Mr. Bradley was talking about a problem that Ms. Kirshner was having with her boyfriend, L.J. Larry Galvin. Is that correct? Remember him talking about that?
I believe he said L.J. Yes, yeah. He did say.
And Ms. Kirshner talked about that as well.
Yes, she did.
And that Mr. L.J. or whatever, L.J. was threatening both of them.
Yes.
And that Mr. Bradley felt the need to have a gun to protect himself from L.J. and to protect her.
Yes.
Isn't it true also that Ms. Kirshner, during her testimony, said that at one point when the car was surrounded by the Econo Life staff, that she stomped on the gas, which made the car go forward?
Yes, you may. Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it's been over 2 hours. I usually give you a break at 2 hours. It's been about 2 hours and 10 minutes by my calculation. We want to try to get through this witness today. Is everyone comfortable, or do you need a break? And if you do, I won't hold that against you, and neither will anyone else. Are we okay? For 10 more minutes? 15 more minutes, possibly? Are you sure? Okay. I don't want to single anyone out, but are we okay? If I don't hear anything, we're going to continue. Okay, I have a question by one of the jurors, which I need to address with the attorneys, which I'm not able to do at this time, so I will respond to this question as soon as I have an opportunity to speak with the attorneys. Okay, Mr. Moore, you may continue.
Toward the end of the interrogation, Mr. Bradley, Agent Spatafor was asking questions concerning brain to head injuries Mr. Bradley may or may not have sustained. And do you think Mr. Bradley is qualified to give an opinion about whether he has ever experienced a head injury?
I would think that he could, yes.
Would you not think that's the medical?
I would think Mr. Bradley would know if he's ever experienced a head injury or not. I certainly would.
What's the difference between just getting hit in the head and actually sustaining brain damage? What are the indications of brain damage which anybody on the street would know that he or she is experiencing? He already he's answered the question as if he knows it.
I'm going to sustain the objection as to the form of the question.
You believe that any person who has a brain injury would, without question, and to a degree of medical certainty, would be able to diagnose that brain injury?
Objection.
And overruled.
You understand the question?
I think you're asking me to give a medical opinion.
No, I'm not.
You're talking about a brain injury, Mr. Moore. What are my qualifications to talk about a brain injury?
So you're not qualified to talk about brain injury? Is that what you're saying?
How do I know if you have a brain injury or not, if you sustained one over the years? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I haven't done a CAT scan, an MRI.
It would take those things to diagnose a brain injury, wouldn't it?
I would think so.
Right. And so if you're asking Mr. Bradley to self-diagnose his brain injury, then he can't really do that, can he?
I think the question of Agent Spatafor was asking...
Can he do that? He hasn't answered the question. It's a yes or no answer.
I'm going to allow the witness to explain that answer because I don't think that was a yes or no question. So, Agent, you may complete your answer.
Could he ask the question again, Your Honor?
Sure. You think Mr. Bradley was qualified to diagnose a brain injury, which he may have had at that time?
What I would think is that he would go to seek medical attention and know that if he had a brain injury or not. Did he ever have any head trauma? It's a question, and he said he never had any.
Do you think that Mr. Bradley is qualified to diagnose that brain injury and himself? Do you think he's qualified to do that?
I don't think he's...
He hasn't answered the question.
Okay, overruled.
I don't think he's qualified to medically diagnose himself, but he certainly can tell us if he's ever experienced a head injury. And the question was head injury.
And do you think Mr. Bradley is qualified to give an opinion about whether he has a mental illness? Do you think he's qualified to give that opinion?
I would believe he'd be qualified enough to tell us if he's ever been diagnosed with some kind of psychosis or psychiatric issue or mental health issue.
Suppose he hadn't been diagnosed with a mental health issue. Do you think Mr. Bradley is qualified to give a diagnosis of whether or not he has a mental illness or not?
Overruled.
I would say as a layman, no, he cannot officially diagnose anyone with that, but he certainly would be able to tell me if he had ever been diagnosed by a doctor with one of those issues.
Okay. Can I have a minute?
Yes, you may.
One other thing. You Bradley about the possession of the car, and there was some confusion about what word he was using. It sounded like borrow, but he said it was he had bought it. Correct?
I believe so.
But he had not transferred the tag or the registration or anything into his name. Is that correct?
Yes.
You agree with that?
I believe so, yes.
I have more questions.
Redirect by the state.
Yes, Your Honor. Agents, when you are interviewing suspects, you try to gather as much information as you can before the interview.
Yes.
And when you have two potential suspects, in this particular case, you were involved in interviews of both, correct?
Yes, I was.
And are there advantages or reasons why you would have the same agent involved in both interviews?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury why that?
Well, Mr. Bradley couldn't tell me something that wasn't true that Mr. Kirshner told, or Ms. Kirshner told me, and vice versa for later. If we had to go back and interview Ms. Kirshner again, I now knew what Mr. Bradley had told us. And that could be used in the interview technique.
So it's part of having the knowledge and be able to confront and try to gather more information.
Yes.
And is there any strategy or any process to determine who you interview first, or just a matter of you just have to decide to interview one or the other?
It just depends on the circumstances. And in this one, we wanted to interview Ms. Kirshner first before we went in with Mr. Bradley. We didn't believe that she was the person that had shot Deputy Pill.
Objection, unresponsive narrative.
Okay, sustained.
Why was the decision made to interview Andrea Kirshner first?
We wanted to have all the information that Andrew could give us before we went to talk to Mr. Bradley.
And then was the decision also made to have the same agent yourself involved in both interviews?
Yes.
You indicated that part of your purpose in talking to the defendant is to make sure that he understands you and to make a decision about Miranda. Could you explain to the jury what's your purpose?
In making sure that he can understand Miranda?
Yes.
Well, certainly Miranda is very important. I mean, it's been around for many, many years. It's something that's required. We have to advise people of their constitutional rights. It's important. I need to make sure that he understands fully and comprehends what we're talking about, that he understands each and every right, so that he can make a coherent decision on whether or not he's going to talk to us or not. Because it's going to be played again in court, and that's something we need to live with.
During your 26 years in law enforcement, have you had defendants who, after your contact with them, you felt that they did not understand Miranda?
Objection, irrelevant.
Okay, sustained.
Judge, if I may approach?
Yes, you may.